Alrighty, gang. Here's to nights that turn into mornings and friends that turn into family. Cheers!
Happy birthday to you.
Hello. Welcome to the Friendship IRL podcast. I'm your host, Alex Alexander, and each week we explore what's working and what's not in our friendships, community, and connections. Have you ever wished you could sit down and have a conversation about what is really going on in your friendships? Well, you found your people. Join us as we dive into real-life stories and explore new ways to approach these connections. Together, we're reimagining the rules of friendship. We all know that feeling where you're just chatting with someone. You just met them, but the vibes are right. The banter is there. The conversation feels easy. You're just clicking. There's an energy between the two of you that just feels ripe with potential. And you're saying to yourself, like, you're my kind of human. You're excited. And at a certain point, maybe it's during the conversation, or maybe it's at the end when you go to say your goodbyes and leave, you are hit with this realization that you don't know if you're ever going to see this person again. Like, you met them in a way that is not your normal. Maybe you're at a one-time event, or you're traveling. You met them on a train. I don't know how you met this person, but there's something about this fact that there feels like so much friendship potential, and yet you don't know the way forward. And I'm talking about this because I just lived this. Let's back up a second. A few months ago, I made a professional connection. We were working together on something for a while. There were many interactions to be had, and everyone just felt so easy, so fun. Like, yes, we were working, but we were chatting, we were bantering. I mean, at a certain point, we'd been working like this together for so long that I feel like we could both tell that the energy was there. Like, we kind of started asking a little more personal questions, things I wouldn't normally ask in a professional setting, but I'm telling you, the energy was right. So we got to the end of, I guess, our working relationship. And I didn't want to let this connection end. It felt like such a fun connection. But there was really no logical way for us to get together where it was like, we weren't in the same industry. So we didn't really make sense for us to, let's say, go to networking events together. I didn't know enough about them to know if we had overlapping hobbies. I maybe could have been more proactive. I'll talk more about that in a second. So we get to the end, and I have this moment where I'm like, okay, I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit here. I'm going to get creative. I'm going to take one for the team. And even though it makes no sense for me to go to a networking event that this person would go to, I'm going to go. Why not? Is it a little weird that I'm there? Yes, but it is probably the most comfortable jump I can find for us to hang out now that we don't have a professional reason to connect all the time. Of course, an invite comes in for a networking event. I'm like, hey, do you want to go to this together? This person's like, you want to go to that? Like, you don't work in that industry. I'm like, I don't know. Let's just go. So we do. We go to this networking event together, and we have so much fun. Again, the banter is there. We're just chatting it up. Some personal conversation comes up. Some work-related conversation comes up. Before we knew it, the hours had flown by. We made other friends there. We were having a good time. We were a good time. People wanted to come chat with us because we just had that energy. So we get to the end of the night. We both agreed we're walking out together. And there's kind of that moment where you're like, okay, well, what next? There's no natural answer here. It doesn't make sense for me to keep going back to these networking events. And when I said I kind of messed up on my own advice. Often when I'm talking about you meeting new people, like if you go back and you listen to my small talk episode, I talk about the idea of being really proactive about trying to find other interests, other things you might connect about. I did not do that. I should have done that. I did not. Some questions would have been like, we're already kind of in this professional, personal realm. We've already asked personal questions to each other to try and get to know each other. So some natural questions would be like, you have a weekend off. What do you like to do with your spare time? What do you do in the evenings? What are you watching? Do you travel a lot? Are you into music or movies, or like what arts are you into? Do you read a lot? Right? Because let's say this person said, oh gosh, I read all the time. That could have maybe given me an in to say like, oh, well, I've been meaning to check out this bookstore. Do you have any interest in going? And that's still an ask, but I didn't do any of that. I was just so in the zone having a good time. So we get to the end of the night and there's this kind of what's next energy in the air. And this idea of let's get dinner sometime just gets thrown out. There's a follow-up text like, hey, I had a lot of fun. I was serious about dinner. Let's set a date. And at this point, I'm here to tell you that if you are thinking, wow, this sounds a lot like dating, it kind of is. It kind of is. As much as we think that we date in one period of our life and we never have to do it again, really, we should all just get used to the fact that we probably have to do some friend dating at one point or another. And now there's a couple places where this differs from dating in a romantic sense. Then the first one is doesn't need to be any pressure, right, to find the one. I'm just looking for someone I have a good friend connection with. What we do together, I don't know. I don't need to find someone that I can do my whole life with. I don't need to find someone to live with and go after shared goals with and maybe manage finances with or maybe raise a family with. None of that pressure is there. But on the flip side, that means that at the end of a date, most people, there's kind of like a shared reality end goal, right? An idea of I'm looking for a long-term relationship, or I'm looking for someone I can have fun with, or I want to get married and start a family very soon. Like those create some sort of a shared reality that you can agree upon. In friendship, we have no clue. And we're not necessarily getting to the end of this friend hangout and deciding whether we're going to be the closest of friends in 5 years, or we're just going to become book club friends. We have no idea. And that uncertainty, you got to remember that uncertainty as I keep going through this episode, because sometimes we have to push through some uncomfortable feelings to keep the train rolling when we're making a new friend, especially making a new friend where we can't rely on proximity. But that uncertainty of kind of like what the end goal is here or what the end reality is, it can make it hard to keep taking action because like, what's the point? What am I even taking action for? I don't know. Is all this awkwardness and energy worth it for an art gallery friend? That's what your brain might start saying to you. So don't forget that. So this whole situation, this whole story that I've told you about, it got me thinking about this weird gray zone that we can all find ourselves in when we can't rely on proximity to make friends. Today's episode isn't so much about solutions. I don't have any way for you to get rid of this weird gray area. There will probably always be some uncomfortable moments, awkwardness. But I do believe that if we talk about it and acknowledge that it feels awkward and that this is super normal to feel this way, then hopefully we can talk our brains off a ledge and we can start to accept that this is a normal part of the process. I always love to compare making friends or connections to other areas of our life. So as I was thinking about this, it's kind of like normalizing the fact that when we start a new type of exercise, like, guys, my arms are so sore today, truly, actually. I went paddleboarding yesterday for the first time in months, and my arms are so sore, right? It's uncomfortable. And I felt a little awkward on the board. I'm going to be honest. There were a couple times, it's been a really long time since I've done this thing where I just like lose my balance and fall off backwards. There were 2 times yesterday where I almost did that. And it's a form of exercise I've done before, mind you. But when I tell you that, your brain is like, yeah, well, that's just a normal part of the process, Alex. You're getting back out there on your paddleboard, similar to getting back on a bike. You might wobble a little bit more in the beginning. Your legs would be sore. You look at me and be like, yeah, well, it's been a while. In fact, I told Michael I was sore last night, and he just looked at me and he was like, yeah, that makes sense. I want to get to a place societally, gosh, I got big goals, societally, where that weird gray zone of making new friends, where you have to push forward through uncomfortable moments and awkwardness, where that's normal, where it's not questioned, and where you don't tell yourself like, oh, I'm so bad at this, or this probably isn't a good friendship, right? It feels a little uncomfortable, and friendship is supposed to be easy. I don't want that. None of that. I want to get to a place where if somebody tells you the story that I just told you, your response is like, yeah, well, you're in the gray of making a new friend. It's kind of how it goes when you can't rely on proximity. Keep going. When we don't acknowledge the things that make this gray area feel so, then it just becomes so easy to convince ourselves that it's not meant to be, right? This friendship's not meant to be. Maybe in another life where we fit easier into each other's life, then we'd go for it. But we kind of end up in this chicken or the egg problem. It's similar if you've heard me in the past talk about how, you can just cut off all your friends that don't feel quite right. Sometimes you need to, but more often than not, you can do that, and then you have to make new friends, which is uncomfortable. Or you can have hard conversations with your current friends, and that's uncomfortable. They're both uncomfortable and hard. Pick your version. I don't care what you do. There's no right or wrong way. It's one or the other. This is a similar situation. Like, we're in a dilemma here because what we want is proximity as modern adults. And I talk a lot about that on the podcast. I talk about, how to find third spaces, even though there's a massive decline, how to join community organizations, how to connect more with your neighbors, how to become more engaged in your work or school or children's school, right? All these places where you could have proximity. Joining a community group like my Toastmasters Club or a place of worship, right? But those are all like making commitments, and you got to get in there and you got to inject yourself into the group. You got to show up every week, even though you're like, oh man, I got to go make small talk again. I don't want to do that, right? That is uncomfortable. Creating that feeling of proximity, it just isn't built into our modern world. It's not for most people. So you're going to have to put energy into creating that for yourself. So that's like, I guess, the chicken. The egg is you don't want to do that. That's fine. There's no right or wrong way. But when you do feel a connection that feels aligned, you got to push through this yucky gray area, because you can't just rely on seeing this connection that just feels so right. You can't rely on seeing them regularly. And so I'm going to ask you, right, chicken or the egg, just take a second. I like to ask hard questions. What places in your life right now, is your own personal answer, are you frequenting? Like, what places do you have that consistency in the proximity to people where you're connecting regularly? Because it's not just going. If you pick up your kids from school, for example, I saw a reel this morning. Somebody's like, oh, I was waiting to pick up my kids from school, but all the other parents are socializing in front of the doors. I don't like to do that. I sit in the car. Like, what are you doing? Are you going? And are you putting yourself out there? Some people are. You might be. I can think of so many people who are. But we also live in a world where a lot of people, right, like to be at home. They aren't really a part of any community groups. They don't really know their neighbors. Maybe they work from home. So just take stock of that for yourself. It's important to admit to ourselves whether we are actually putting ourselves in places with that natural overlap with people or if we aren't. And if we are not, then where are you making your connections? And after listening to this episode today, I hope that if you are out and about, if you are not putting yourself in those like group settings, when you're out and about and that chance connection that just feels good appears, that you will lean in and keep taking the steps necessary to move through this really weird, yucky, gray area phase and build a connection and make friends, even when you can't rely on consistency. So let me talk a little bit about what makes this area feel so uncertain. Maybe that's the best way to put it. There's a few things that I can kind of put my finger on. And again, I don't have a solution for these. I'm just hoping that acknowledging them and normalizing them will help some people keep moving forward. So the first one is that there is some vulnerability in admitting that we want to hang out with this person again, right? We don't know what that end goal is. So the goal here is just like, I don't know, I think you're a nice person. We seem to connect. And it's kind of vulnerable to admit that sometimes. It's vulnerable to say, hey, I mean, maybe it's like, it's hard to get my schedule aligned with some of my closest friends and get a dinner solo. But I would like to spend 2 hours with you and just see where things go. That can feel kind of vulnerable. If you go back and you listen to episode 12, way back in the archives of the podcast, I talk about my roots framework. And one of those roots is story roots, which is really just the beliefs you have about your friendships. And when you're making a new friend, you don't have a lot of beliefs, right? A belief would be, you care about me, or you're always there for me, or I trust you. With this new person, there's not a lot of beliefs there. So with some of my older friends, if I'm like, hey, let's get dinner, even though maybe we don't have even a lot of shared interests anymore, it makes sense, right? Because we both have this strong belief that like, I care about you and therefore I would like to spend some time with you. But when you don't have that strong belief, it can be kind of vulnerable. It's like, well, I want to get together with you, but I don't really know why. You seem like a nice person. Now, the second thing that I think can get in the way is that we have to put in energy. We have to take action, right? In order for me and this person to get together for dinner, we have to message back and forth out of the blue. Like, hey, I know we talked about dinner. Do you want to get that on the calendar? And then not only do we have to navigate that conversation and put energy in there, but we also have to navigate like what we're doing. I guess we kind of predetermined dinner, but it could have been a walk or inviting each other to our houses for game night, right? The options were endless. We kind of settled on dinner. It felt like an easy thing for the two of us, but it could be anything for you. And then there's some other like layers we have to navigate. Now, again, if you listen to episode 12, I talk about my roots framework. This person and I like don't really know that many things about each other. And if let's say we're coworkers, if we had that proximity where we saw each other all the time, then over, I don't know, a few weeks, a few months, we would start to know little details about each other, right? We would learn if we're more homebodies or we like to go out because we'd maybe hear what we did maybe like, oh, what'd you do last night? What'd you do this weekend? Maybe we would learn that somebody is very connected to their family and that's a big priority for them. They see their family every Sunday, right? All these little details we would learn about each other. Now, something that this person might have learned about me and probably would, because it's a pretty big part of my life at the moment, is part of my chronic illness stuff is that I have a lot of food restrictions, like a comical amount of food restrictions. And it's hard enough for me to navigate, let alone Michael, my husband. Then you have the layer of like my closest friends who, I mean, I met up with a really close friend last week and their go-to is to just kind of like let me pick what we eat, right? It's like, what's the current situation? Where should we go for lunch? Like they just let me pick. So the reason I'm telling you this is it's already this place I have to put energy in and like work to update my friends. And I can't just be easy breezy, go with whatever people want, because I'd end up really sick in bed for multiple days. So this new friend, we get to the end of our conversation of like, oh, we should get together for dinner. And I'm like, hey, I'm happy to come to you. Like the neighborhood you live in is always really fun. There's lots of good restaurants there. This person's like, oh, great, I'll pick a restaurant. And this is the moment I realized, like, wow, if we work together, you'd probably have some sense of this because you'd like see me taking medicine at the office, or you'd see me being really picky at the department potluck, things like that. But you have no idea. So I had to be like, oh, okay, well, you can totally pick the restaurant, but do you remember how I have all those health things? And they don't really know. I've just said, like, I've had all these health problems. I was like, a lot of those have to do with food. So it's actually hard. There are just certain cuisines that are easier, and there are certain ones that I absolutely can't eat. But this whole conversation, not only is it a little vulnerable, it's also a lot of energy. Like I have to figure out how to navigate this and how to have this conversation where I can't just go along with the flow. Right? So that can feel tricky. And I think that could be a major point where friendships where you don't have that built-in proximity can fall off the radar. Now, the next place where I think making friends without being able to rely on proximity can go off the rails is that there are so many opportunities to overthink and spiral. When you have to initiate every interaction and you don't have the built-in proximity, when I go to send this message, I'm like, oh, is this too direct? Am I being too forward? Am I asking too much to get together for dinner for 2 hours? Do they even want to get together for 2 hours? Should I give them more time? I know we talked about doing this, but I haven't heard from them in a while, right? There's so many places for my brain to just go off the tracks. And although there might be that overthinking that happens, if it's somebody where you're going to meet up with them at work every day, you may not have as much overthinking because you're about to see them. Or you might ask them one simple question or mention again, like, hey, I know we talked about getting appetizers after work one night. We should still do that. You want to do that, right? And you can do that a few times. And then after they've said yes, the third or fourth time, you're like, let's actually put this on the calendar. Because it does seem like we both want to do this because we keep bringing it up. And when we don't have that proximity to rely on, right, I just have to send a text kind of out of the blue being like, do you want to do this? Should we do this? There are just so many moments to overanalyze and let your brain fill in the gaps when you aren't seeing each other consistently. And if you do that, if you know you do that, it's just something good to be aware of in these moments, because it could be the reason you don't send the text. Now, this entire episode, like I said, I didn't really give you any solution to this problem. I'm sorry. I personally would also love a solution. I would love to be able to just rush past this entire phase and look into a crystal ball and know if I'm going to be friends with this person in 5 years and what we talk about and if we hang out or if it fizzled and I don't need to put my energy in. I would love to know, but we can't. So we just have to be okay with the uncertainty, and we have to be okay with pushing forward, or maybe a better way to say it would be like taking action, even though it feels a little mucky to do so. Even though our brain is maybe telling us like, just let it go. So often people tell me that they want to find those connections that just really click. I think that's what we all want. Connection is about this energy exchange. And so when those happen, we can't always predict if they're happening somewhere where we will just easily be able to flow through this friendship, where we can look back and say like, oh, I don't even know how we became friends. We were just together every week in that group. And over time, now I can't imagine my life without you. That's not always going to be the reality. Sometimes we have to propel this thing forward despite feeling a little uncomfortable, a little awkward, a little weird, a little pushy, despite feeling like it's taken a lot of effort. And at the end of the day, this connection might turn into something. It might turn into nothing, but you'll never know if you don't give it a try. With that, I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Friendship IRL. I am so honored to have these conversations with you, but don't let the chat die here. Send me a voice message. I created a special website just to chat with you. You can find it at alex.chat. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle at it's Alex Alexander, or go ahead and leave a review wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. Now, if you want to take this conversation a step further, send this episode to a friend. Tell them you found it interesting and use what we just talked about as a conversation starter the next time you and your friend hang out. No need for a teary goodbye. I'll be back with a new episode next week.